Well, hello there, YouTubers and fellow beginning programmers. So, I decided to make a video today regarding making reusable functions in C++. And something that I see very common is that when you're starting out in C++ and you start from the command line, you tend to do a lot of input and output. And initially, you don't even necessarily know functions, but once you learn functions, you can begin getting input using a function. And one easy way to do it is to write a reusable function that allows you to do it. So what I see normally is something like this. So let's say we have some data that we're getting from the command line. So let's say that we have a name, let's say an age, and we don't even have to initialize it. And then we have a name, and then let's say we have a GPA. Then we turn around and do something like this. So we get the age, so we say cout, enter your name. And then, and I'm not sure why it's not liking this. What did I do wrong here? C query. I must not have it saved as C++. What's going on? So let's see. Let's run it. Oh, it's working fine. I'm not sure why I'm getting a squiggly. Invalid operands to binary expression. It's O stream. I'm not sure why it's not liking this. Okay, so anyway, let's just continue. And so then I see something like this where then you say name, and then you do another output and say cout, enter your age. And same thing again, and then you grab the age. And you continue doing this and you say cout. And then finally you do some processing here, of course. You do something with the data. And finally you output it. So let's go ahead and give that a try. Name, age, and GPA. And so there you have that. But what happens after a program, and this is a very small program, but as you can see, it already starts getting big. So a better approach might be to just say, write some reusable code that then you can use not just for this program, but use it for other programs as well. So let's just give it a try. And let's say we create a function and we return an int and we just call it prompt for int. And it takes a parameter as a string, and we just say message. And what this function does is it's going to output the message, and then after it outputs the message, it gets the result, gets the whatever the user entered. And so in this case, since it's an int, we'll have the entry, and we just return the entry. And this, as you can see, it's a little bit longer than just these two lines. However, we can now reuse it. And we can do the same thing for the float and the string. So let's go ahead and do the string. And in reality, this can be done also through templates, but when you're starting out, you don't know anything about templates, so let's just uh, keep it like this where we write redundant functions. So string, and this is a string, and we have the entry. And so now we say, instead of saying all of this, we can say age equals prompt for int and we could do the same thing for name, and let's put name up here. And we can do the same thing for the GPA. Now the GPA, we haven't wrote the function yet, but let's just say that we follow the same pattern and we say prompt for float. And we don't have a prompt for float just yet, but let's go ahead and create one. And so now that we have this, this should still continue to work. So let's go ahead and give it a try. Enter name, GPA 3.5. And as you can see, that works. Now, you notice that instantly this becomes a lot cleaner. So because we only have the prompt and we have the reusable. Now, the other thing is that we can also move these functions down to the bottom of our program or even put them into a separate C combination of a H file and a C++ file. So we can take all this, cut all this, and put it at the bottom. And actually, we still need it at the top because C++ needs to see the definitions, not the definitions, but the function declarations. And so we just have that. And another thing, we don't need to even, when we have the declarations where it needs to see them, we don't need to have the actual parameter names. We could just have string. I always like to see them though, because it's just better for me, but you don't have to. So you don't have to see them. So this will still work, and this cleans your code a lot. Now, if we put this in an H file and the other thing in a C++ file, then all we would have to do is include it up here and say include whatever utilities.h or whatever. And we would just include that, but we have it in the same file. So this makes it a lot cleaner. So this should still work. It compiles fine. So and as you can see, it still runs. The other thing is that sometimes you may want to do validation, and in order to do validation, you may want to keep them in a loop where they're doing it. So would you want to do that here, or would you want to do another function around it? So one thing that you may want to do is to say to have a validator wrapped around it. So for example, let's just do the age, for example, in this case. So we'll say validate, we'll say validate, we'll make it a Boolean, and we'll say validate int entry, and we can pass in same thing message. And if we're validating int, well, we're going to have to enter, for example, we're going to have to enter a range. So we can say int min, int max. And let's make this a little wider so we can don't have to wrap it around like that. So in this case, what we can do is we can say, we can create a Boolean and we set it to false. And we can actually put it in a while loop. And here we could simply say the entry, since we know it's an integer, and we don't even have to initialize it really because we can say prompt for int. So we can say entry equals prompt for entry, prompt for int, and we pass in the message. And we could say if, we could actually just say is valid equals entry is greater than or equal to min, and entry less than or equal to max. And so we just keep them in there, right? So the other thing that we can do here, for example, is say invalid entry. For example, we could actually take an output and just say, um, we can say entry is not valid, enter a value, or we could even put it on another line, entry is not valid, cout, must be between min and max. And we only want to display this message in this case. We only want to display this message if it's not valid. So we only want to display this if it's not valid. And so we keep repeating, we keep them in this loop. So now you can see how we reuse something and we can actually validate the entries. And we could do the same thing for floats and for strings and so on. So for example, instead of us prompting from for string, now we can say validate in entry. So we could say, and let's say that we wanted our ages to be between 15 and 80 or something. So we are validating in entry for now. So we're only validating, oh, we don't want to do it for that one actually. That's for the, let's switch this to age and let's do this name and change this to string. Sorry about that. And the only reason I did it this way, so enter your age and this will be enter your name. I just kind of swapped them around. So let's put this one back on top again. So the age is going to validate an age that's between 15 and 80. And so it's going to prompt into that. Of course, we can do the same thing, pull this down to the bottom of the function, to the bottom of the file. And let's just go ahead and take this and say that's definition validate in entry. So we can actually validate the in entry. And when it gets to the enter your age, if it's not between 15 and 80, it just kind of keeps you stuck there. So let's go ahead and see if this compiles and runs. Okay, so it didn't run. It says, okay, function bool is valid equals false. Okay, so we have our while loop is wrong. Let me see what I did wrong there. Oh, I didn't say while. Do while. So let's see if it compiles this time. And no return statement. Oh, I have to return the validate entry. So the thing about this is here I have a problem. I have the bullet valid, but what I really want to return is the entry. So what I want to have is to be an int and return that entry. The is valid check is still there. However, we're checking and returning the entry. So validate, or you can say prompt for valid entry or something like that. So anyway, we call this. So let's go ahead and stop it and rerun it. And it didn't like something. Okay. Oh, it's because I have to change also here. Let's go ahead and run it now. And so now we enter the name, Joe. And if I enter an entry that's like, for example, less than 15, entry is not valid, must be between 15, enter your age. I enter 11, it keeps me stuck there, 10, and so on. And if I enter 15, then it will move on, and then I can enter my GPA, and finally it's done. So that's a couple of things that you want to do when you're starting out. It may seem like a lot of code, but if you think about it, you're going to be reusing this. So sometimes for strings, you may do something similar. So GPA, you can already see that how it's going to work. But strings is a little bit different because you don't have a range, but you may have, like, for example, limit in length and so on. So you may want to check that they actually have something greater than a space or empty string, or you may want to actually check the string length. So the question is, how do you get the string length of in C++? So let's just see. Uh, we need C++. So if we look for the string length, there is a length, and according to this, so we can just get length. So if we were testing a string, we may do something similar and say, so in this case we say validate for entry, and this thing I think we can override and it wouldn't be a problem. But let's see. Let's take and validate for string entry. And of course, in this case, we won't want to return the string. And maybe you're checking min length and max length. And we're checking the length of the string. And so in this case, we check, and the entry is going to be string. And in this case, it's a little bit different because we have to say if entry dot length. And we should be able to say that because it's a string. Reference to non-static member function will be called. And I believe we called it right. So string.length. I believe we're right. Okay, so and then greater than or equal to min, and entry less than or equal to max. Oh, and the problem here is that we need to say len and max len. And so that should be fine. I'm not sure why it's giving me an error. So in this case, we're going to validate. And so if we call this, and let's go ahead and move this down to the bottom. And so it's fine there, but up here, all we need is the declaration. I may need to change the font a little bit, or let's see. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have validate string entry, and so what we have to change in our main is we have to say validate string entry, and it should be fine. And of course we have to tell it the min length. Maybe our min length, we have a min length but not a max length or so on. So maybe we want something that's the minimum is 1 and maybe the maximum is 30 for a name or something like that. And I'm not sure why I'm getting this squiggly here. No matching function, validate string entry. It doesn't seem to like my std string. It's almost like it wants me to say, even though I said using namespace std, it doesn't like it. Validate string entry, it looks right. So maybe I gotta misspell validate string entry. Let's see. All of a sudden it likes it. What was it before? Okay. So this is gonna keep us stuck. And so now this validate string entry, of course, has to say a value. So we would have to change it where we say the message. And in this case, and so we say entry length must be between the min, and we have to say min length and max length here. And everything should be fine there at that point. Let's go ahead and run it. So enter your name, and if I enter nothing, oh, it didn't gig me for some reason, but if I say that, value must be between, and oh, it stated in loop, value must be between 15 and 80. So obviously there's something going on, so we must stop it because, ooh, we're in the end of the loop. Uh-oh. This is one of the things that I don't like about REPL IT is that if you get stuck, I think I have a potential to lose all my code. And since it's in the end of the loop and I can't stop it, I have to refresh it. So I might have to begin all over again. And maybe I lost my internet connection. Okay. It says it's loading. Okay, what did I do that was so screwed up? So prompt for, oh, I'm doing prompt for int. I should have been doing prompt for string, and I think that's what screwed it all up. So, and I think that was my mistake. That should not even have compiled though, because I'm prompting for int, and then that should not been so. This should not work. The length should have not worked, and it should have given me a compiler error. So let's try it again. Enter, and it doesn't. So what if I do that? Enter your age. Let's say 21. GPA 3.5. Okay, 3 divided by 5. I didn't mean to enter 3. But the thing is that the thing here is that validate string entry. Let's go something more like 5 because I think what's happening is that it's not detecting when you don't enter anything. I'm not sure if that's a issue with just C++ overall if I'm doing something wrong. So let's go ahead and try it where it's with 5. Okay, so let's try it again. Okay, we have everything seems to be right. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it a run. Enter your name. If I enter Joe in this case, it shouldn't take it. Entry is not valid. It must be between, and so if I enter Joey, it's still going to tell me that. And if I enter Robert or something, then it should be fine. And then it goes on. But I have to investigate why it doesn't work with empty strings. It should work, but apparently it's not counting it as an entry for some reason. So that could be the problem, or it could just simply be that it just didn't work that time because something's going on with Ripple IT. But as you can see there, you clean up your code a little bit. Sometimes it might not be recommended that you do your validation as you go. This is like, for example, what you would consider sometimes client-side validation, where you validate something before you pass it on. And you're wrapping it up and you're coupling some things. You're coupling the input with the validation. Sometimes people may not want to do that. So you want to separate getting it and then validating it as two separate entries. Or you could do it through a callback, but you may want to get the input, and once you get the input, then validate. But one of the things is that in C++, when you're doing console input, is you normally just don't want to let them out of there, because what happens is sometimes you don't have any validation at all, and you want to get valid input, and if they enter something invalid, then it's going to throw the rest of your program off. So in C++, I think this is the exception where you would actually do the validation right where they do the entry. And I know this seems like a lot of code, but it's really not a lot. All you're doing is getting the input and then keeping them stuck in the validation. And I hate to see REPL IT do it this way, because you don't see the entire set of code. So all it's doing is you get the input, you validate it, and this is just taking a Boolean value, which is taking this Boolean expression and saying entry length, if entry length is greater than or equal to the minimum length and less than or equal to the maximum length, then its valid will be true. If it's outside of those bounds, outside of that range between, let's say in this case 5 and 30, it's going to say if it's not valid, output, and then this loop is going to keep looping. While this is false, it's going to loop around and keep you stuck, or keep the user stuck, until they enter something valid, finally letting them out. And this is something that is very easy to use, and as you can see here, you're not cluttering your main functionality with all those details. You're just sending it out somewhere where you know it's reusable and it's solid, and maybe you work out all the kinks and then you don't have to worry about that, and then you actually do that. So that's something that I see that's common, that students don't take advantage of reusing functions for their input. And if you just take these simple functions, then you can reuse them and then focus on your other stuff. And one of the things about functions that I just want to say is that how short should a function be? The shorter the function, the better. Of course, it has to hold its weight. I mean, there's no reason to write a function that's not holding its weight. However, if you have a short function, then it makes the program a lot more readable. Like, for example, this function is getting on the end where it's getting a little bit long. Sometimes you can't avoid that in something like main, but it's still not quite that long. If you can all read it and without scrolling, then it's pretty good. So all these functions here you can kind of read without scrolling, and the reason for that is because it allows you to see the entire program from top to bottom, where maybe you don't have to scroll all the way up to see, oh, how did I declare this? How did I declare that? You're looking at everything without having to scroll. It clears your mind up to be able to store that information, say, okay, I'm just concentrating if it's valid and entry. I can read it all here, and I don't have to do a lot of figuring out. Plus, the other thing is that it's abstracted well enough. It's decent, because you know that you're going to get a string entry, you have a message, a min length, and a max length, and it kind of tells you everything it's going to do. So it's going to keep you stuck until you enter a valid. Same thing with the validate in entry, which is very, very similar. So it makes things a lot easier when you can separate things and abstract things a little bit, and that way it makes your program cleaner and easier to read from top to bottom. If I've tested these functions pretty well, I don't have to think about what they do. I just kind of use them, and then I can focus on the real important logic of my code. So anyway, that's all I have. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, you can give it a thumbs down, though I prefer that you don't, and just ask me the question why you think or let me know why you think it's a bad video. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you like more videos like this, please subscribe. I plan to bring you more. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.